Well, hello and welcome to this edition of the Lynne Hayes Freeland Show. Well, you know the term state of emergency, but do you know the term state of educational emergency here in the city of Pittsburgh? It's something we've been hearing about all week, and it's because of my guest today, City Council Representatives Daniel Lavelle, Reverend Ricky Burgess. Welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you.
This is almost groundbreaking, is it not, to talk about a state of educational emergency in the city of Pittsburgh?
Yeah, the two twin public health crises, one of systematic racism and the other of COVID-19, has turned is really the cause of this. The COVID-19 has shut our schools down.
Mhm.
Systematic racism has caused an achievement gap. And because the kids were already behind, now they're further behind, it's created a state of educational emergency in the city of Pittsburgh. It'll have long-term consequences on all students, but particularly it would disaffect students of color.
And so, did this really come to a head? And Daniel, I'll address this to you. Did this really come to an explosive head when the school board decided the kids weren't going back until at least April? And that, for a lot of people, that was like, they're probably not going back this year.
Yes, for me, a number of things brought it to a head. Right. One, as you're well aware, I have two children in
Mhm.
PPS, and so as many parents have been equally frustrated. When you talk to the doctors and the scientists, and the CDC recently came out and said there's no reason why, especially for elementary school children, that you cannot open the schools back up. And so when they voted to not to, that was one level of frustration. And I think many parents are also frustrated of the level of education that their children are receiving during COVID and during staying at home. But the other thing that really brought it to my attention was when I had the chance to read the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission's report on Pittsburgh Public Schools. And when I had a chance to look at the numbers and understand how poorly our children were performing, as Reverend Burgess said, so many of our children are already behind. And then to essentially, now we know the children will not have been in the building for a year, to
Mhm.
then look at the achievement gap numbers and the grave disparity where only 38% of Black children in third grade are reading at grade level versus 7% of white children. And the numbers get worse, right? So when you really looked at it, it was like, wait a minute, this is awful. And we have to engage in the conversation.
So, Reverend Burgess, Ricky, talk to me about. We're talking about kids that, in a lot of ways, are teetering. You talk about kids in third grade that can't read, kids in fourth grade that can't read. This is at that turning point. We could lose these kids forever.
Well, that's a barometer, that third and fourth grade year are barometers of their future success in life.
Hmm.
We're going to have, we know that the good news is we actually know the solution. The solution is more academic exposure. We have to have longer school days. We have to have longer school years. We need more out of school time tutoring programs. We need more counseling programs. We need a greater percentage of African American teachers. As one teacher told me, these students really want to know that you love them. If they know you love them, they'll go through the wall with you for you. But if they don't think you love them, then they don't achieve. And so I think it's strong when these kids have role models that look like them and know their experiences in an intimate way. And so the solution is more school, not keeping the schools closed and less school.
All right. So then, Daniel, let me play devil's advocate because I had the benefit. I had you guys on with me on the radio the day you introduced this legislation. And then the next day, I had the president of the school board on with me. Sylvia Wilson was on. And a couple things. One, she told me she felt kind of blindsided by this legislation. And she said that she wished that you had reached out to her directly before you introduced the legislation. And then the other thing she said was, longer school days are nice, summer school is nice, but all of these things cost money. And we're at a period in time when the school board doesn't have excess money. So maybe Daniel, you start, and then Ricky, you weigh in, respond to those two things for me.
So one, and I apologize to Ms. Wilson if I do not have her appropriate number, but I actually did reach out. I reached out to a number of school board members to have the
Mhm.
conversation. I reached out to a number of people who work in the schools to begin having the conversation and voice my concerns, voice my thoughts. Since we actually shut down, I've had numerous conversations. When I can, I'll speak with the principal of my children and voice my frustrations the entire time. So me having this conversation publicly is probably the only shot because over the course of the last year, I've had it privately with a whole lot of people. But I apologize to her if she did not get my message, but I did reach out to her. Two, I understand that, right? But what I also understand is that this is going to take all of us. If we acknowledge that our children are not learning, and they're not, the numbers prove that, right?
Mhm.
If we acknowledge this has been a problem for the last 10 to 12 years, and the commission's report says that, then we have to be willing to say to ourselves, money can't be the issue that stops us figuring out how we reimagine Pittsburgh public schools. If we know, again, I'll use my own children as an example. When the pandemic hit, my son was in first grade. He lost some of his first grade education. Now he's in second
Mhm.
grade. He's losing his second grade education. How is he now expected to go into third grade and compete highly on an academic level? And I'm less worried for my son because I supplement his education with additional work, but I'm more concerned
Mhm.
about all the other children. How are they supposed to go into third grade and really be educated well? The only way to do it, in my personal opinion, we have to immediately begin year-round schooling. Those children need to be in school this summer receiving intense instruction. And to the extent that money is of a concern, let's have that conversation. Let's talk about potentially foundations coming to the table. Let's talk about our eds and meds partners who have $1 billion of budget. Let's talk about how we can collectively, even as a city, figure out the solution and figure out how we
Mhm.
can help if we know that's the only thing that's going to potentially save these children.
Okay. And Ricky, I'm going to have you respond, but let's do it on the other side of the commercial. Okay. We'll take a break. We have a lot more to talk about when the Lynne Hayes Freeland Show continues, so don't go away. We'll be right back.